All right. Good afternoon. Thank you, everyone, for joining this edition of the lunch series. Today's topic will be about raised bed gardening. Um, One of the reasons why I personally got into raised bed gardening was it's easy. You don't have to have a lot of land. So all of these pictures are ones taken personally by myself. So to begin with, just an overview about what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to talk about some advantages, and then there are some disadvantages as well. We're going to talk about site selection and preparation, the materials you need, some of the installation techniques, crop selection, crop management, crop rotation. You do need, or well, if you plant certain crops, you will need some trellises or supports. And then something just to throw in extra is how I personally identify the plants, and then also a tool cleaning bucket. So to start off with, some advantages are, whether you have a large family or a small family, you can tailor a raised bed garden to any size. Myself, it's just me and two dogs here at the house, so I don't need that large of a garden. And I do apologize if you hear any squeaking. One of my dogs is playing with a toy. But this also helps create a site where no suitable land is available. So maybe in an urban site where there is, you live in an apartment complex, you live in a small lot of land, then this creates that kind of a site. It also helps if you have maybe a new home, or maybe you live in a new home development where there's been a lot of bulldozers or track hoes or trucks coming in and out. New construction sites, it's often difficult to kind of create that big garden just because of soil compaction. It also can help increase temperatures and allow for longer growing seasons. So with the increased temperatures, of course, if the soil is all together in a raised bed, you can trap the solar heat, and it'll increase the temperature in these kind of cooler spring days. It also allows for longer growing seasons, so you can use row covers, you can use the cloth to cover them. Some of the disadvantages can be, it does require some sort of structural soundness, because you're going to have the weight of the soil, the weight of the plants, and then also if you keep them outside all the time, especially in a wooden raised bed, it has to withstand the outside elements. So the rain, any kind of snow. Also, mechanical tillage is difficult to use. I'm going to be showing some of the tools and equipment that I use. And really, there's no way to use mechanical tillage in a raised bed unless if you keep the bottom open. Also, the water will drain faster. So sometimes raised beds do require a little bit more frequent of watering. Especially with some of our warm season plants, if you plant them too close together, it reduces the airflow, so it increases, shading and disease. And then, like I talked about a while ago, vining plants will require some type of trellis system. So just to begin, site selection and preparation. Where you put your raised bed needs to get, I put 4 to 8 hours. It's really 6 to 8 hours of full sunlight per day. But since we'll be discussing some cool season crops, they really don't need as much. You'll want that quality water source. And one reason, like I said, the drainage. is a lot faster in a raised bed. And then you will need to consider what kind of soil you'll be working with. So I've got here sunlight. Of course, we all know sunlight for photosynthesis, plant production and growth. And then also it provides heat. So whenever you're out there kind of deciding where you're going to put your garden, um, track your sunlight hours. Make sure that any trees or buildings aren't going to block your garden. Observe any kind of nearby, maybe crops that may compete with water and nutrients. And then also observe the site or the aspect of the site. Sites that face south or southeast often have sun for longer periods. So they're going to get more sunlight. However, the only disadvantage is that can also allow the soil to dry out a lot quicker. As far as water, observe the slope of the site. I'm going to show a couple pictures later where you can see where I personally have had some slope issues with my garden. So soil, you can either bring or use the existing soil, or you can bring in any kind of soil. The first thing that you need to do is conduct a soil test. If you talk to any extension agent across the state, when a client comes in and they say, I want to do this to my land, the first thing you're going to hear them say is, well, we need to go get a soil test. What this soil test does is it helps determine what kind of nutrient levels are within that soil. So what I did was I clicked on that link, and you can see here that UT has up in the corner, it says the Backyard Series. So we do have a publication that talks about site and selection of your soil, but through this publication, it shows you how to take a soil sample. Right here, it talks about sampling location, sampling procedure. You need to go 6 inches down. I have that link embedded so you can refer to this site at an additional time. All right. The other embedded link that I have is Soil Plant and Pest Center soil fertility sampling for lawns. So I'm going to click that one. So here it goes straight to our Soil Plant and Pest Center website, and the link that I've chosen goes straight to the one about soil fertility testing for lawns. So here are the instructions. I apologize for the delay. So here, found at the Soil Plant and Pest Center website, you can see the instructions on how to soil test for home lawns and also home gardens. Also found at that link is the soil submission sheet, and this is used to help the lab determine what crops they need to test for. So you can see down here at the bottom of the page, you can test for your lawn, you can test your garden, if you do have any shrubs, also if you have fruit trees or any flowers, you can send a specific report for those. And for each soil box that you send in, it allows for up to 4 of these crop codes to be sent in with one soil sample. And then this is just a bigger page of it. So, going back to site selection, I put a note on here. It is preferable in the long run to build a raised bed and use amended soil in an area with good light, but poor soil, then choose a site with good soil quality, but more shade. So it's better to put it in the sunlight where there's no shade and then bring in your own soil. So there are many, many different materials that you can use for raised bed gardening. One of the most common is wood. You should choose either cedar or redwood lumber. Those two are more resistant to decay. Don't use any kind of treated lumber or the railroad cross ties because those contain preservatives that can leach into your garden soil. So raw cedar or redwood lumber. You can see I've got a picture here of a stone raised bed garden. You can choose brick, block, containers, cloth, any kind of composites, even straw bales. Recycled plastic can be used as well. And then for your liner for the bottom, you can, pack newspapers on the bottom. You can use the geotextile, the black cloth that everybody uses, or you could even use some type of recycled plastic. As far as configuration goes, make sure that it is stable enough to support the weight of the soil, the weight of the plants whenever they start growing, and the roots of the plants. The most common lumber, and these are for the wooden raised beds, the most common lumber is 2 inches wide. If you have, a smaller raised bed, you can use a 1-inch wide lumber, but these raised beds that are shown, they're 4x8. So you especially need 2-inch lumber. With the width, if you are going to access the raised bed from either side, from 2 sides or from 3 or 4 sides, make sure that the width is no farther apart than 4 feet. The reason is that the average person's reach is about 2.5 feet. So you don't want, whenever all the plants are growing, you won't be able to get to the other side. So make sure your width is no larger than 4 feet if you're accessing from 2 sides. If you only have access to one side of the raised bed, the width should not be 2 or more than 2 to 3 feet. The height of your bed is generally 6 to 12 inches, but it can be deeper. A lot of the raised beds that people use that are standing height, those are a lot deeper. But generally, they're 6 inches to a foot deep. I put on here additional considerations to accommodate those who may not be able to work it at the ground level. Another one of the benefits of these raised beds, you can see here, some of the taller ones, the straw bales, and also with a brick, those allow for, so I work a lot with our local senior citizens, and some of them, well, a lot of them either have a walker or a cane or are in a wheelchair. And building these raised beds to either a chair sitting height or a standing height is able to accommodate them greatly. So part of the installation, if you have suitable soil underneath where you want to put the raised bed, you leave the bottom of the bed open. What this does is this allows the roots to grow into the native soil, so the soil that was already there. With this, you are able to either hand dig or use a mechanical tillage system to combine the soil that was already there with any kind of amendments. So with these kind of beds, you can fill the topsoil from the site. So one of the most common mixes is a 3-part mix. Is you mix the topsoil or the garden soil, that's 1/3. And then the second third is either peat moss or compost. And then the final third is either mix perlite or vermiculite. And that is for if you are incorporating the natural or native topsoil in with your raised bed. Now, the majority of raised beds are not going to contain any native soil whatsoever. With these, you want to create a barrier on the bottom of the raised bed, and that's so that roots don't grow up into your raised bed garden, or that roots don't grow down into that undesirable soil. Your bottom can be used out of wood, cloth, newspapers, cardboard, really anything to kind of block the roots and the weeds coming up. So soilless mixtures, what they do is they help increase drainage, aeration, and then also optimize nutrition. So the most common mix in these kinds of raised beds is 1/3 peat moss, 1/3 vermiculite, and 1/3 compost. Now you'll see the picture on the left. This is actually a raised bed inside a hoop house that this person uses. And then the one on the right, that is mine. And so the first year, whenever I created this raised bed system, which was 6 years ago now. So you can see on the, far right side of that raised bed, I have had a little decomposition of the cedar. That's untreated cedar. However, it's still standing up pretty strong. But so the first year that I created this raised bed system, I used the 1/3 peat moss, 1/3 vermiculite, the 1/3 compost. And I have not added any peat moss or vermiculite into the mix since. Every year, every spring, what I do is I just incorporate compost in there. It's best to use more than one type of compost in the mixture. So on the left, that is an evergreen manure compost, and the compost on the right is a mushroom compost. Also, I put a note on here again about soil testing. So since I only incorporate compost every spring, then what I do is I send off a soil sample after I've incorporated the compost to see what my nutrient availability is. And this allows me, so I go ahead and incorporate the compost usually around the last week of February, if it's, decent weather outside. One, that allows the compost not to be so hot whenever I plant my seeds and plants. But also, I go ahead and send off a soil sample to the soil lab and get that report back. That way I know that if I do need to incorporate any other kind of amendments, I still have time before I plant those seeds and plants. So your crop selection, there's a lot of varieties that you can use within the raised bed system. Of course, you have cool season vegetables. You also have warm season. So your cool season vegetables are planted earlier in the spring or later in the fall. Their optimal growing temperatures are between 60 and 75 degrees Fahrenheit. These tend to be shallower rooted and more sensitive to periods of low moisture. With these low seasons, a lot of the plants can be closer spaced whenever you're planted. with the warm season, you do want them to have a little bit more plant spacing in between, just because the true nature of warm season plants, um, they're more susceptible to disease and pest. So I just listed a few cool season and warm season crops that are commonly grown here in Tennessee. So your crop management, as far as water management, of course, vegetables require 1 to 1.5 inches of water or more during the week. Whenever we get into those hot and dry periods, a lot of times late July, August, early September, you will have to water a little bit more in the raised bed system. Overhead watering can be used, but it's not preferred. Overhead watering would be just, with your water hose or with a sprinkler system. One thing to remember whenever you are watering overhead, don't allow the leaves to remain wet overnight. Keep those leaves as dry as possible overnight to help prevent infection and also the spread of disease. A lot of raised bed gardens use a drip irrigation system. You saw in the picture right here on the left, this person is growing a lot of Swiss chard, a lot of lettuces, a lot of brassicas, which are the shallower rooted compounds. So they use a drip tape and a soaker hose. That is, it helps the leaves to remain dry. It delivers water directly to the soil and also the roots of the plant. And it also allows you to be able to water the soil at a more slower rate. So fertilizing, your fertilization is similar to traditional gardens as far as crops go. If you are using compost, consider any nutrients in the compost of what you put into your soil amendment. You will see the mushroom compost on the left. It's a 0.5, 0.5, 0.2 mixture. So again, I mix my compost in usually, late February, early March, send a soil report in. That way, that my soil report that comes back to me includes the compost that I put in for that growing system. So some of your crop management, weeding and mulching, I put on here reduce time. So this is a picture of that, last week of February, whenever I get out here and really, clean up the raised beds. So you'll see I've got 4x8 raised beds here. And so whenever I weed, I'm really only weeding once a year. I use a metal rake. I also use a metal forked rake. And then sometimes I just get in there with a hand tool, depending on how pretty the weather is. So you can kind of see the top left picture. So those are all the weeds that have come up from late fall to the winter. And then you can see a picture of some of the tools that I use. And then the picture on the right shows kind of how it looks as I go down through there. Now, you'll also notice on the far right of the picture, you will find little piles of weeds. And then you'll see I've got my bucket right here. I've got my bucket there. And you can kind of barely see my hand tool that I use right here. And then there's that forked rake that I use. And I throw all of my weeds right here in this wagon, and then I go dump them into the ditch over here, because I don't want those weed seeds to regerminate. So I get rid of them. So some of your natural mulches are compost and straw. What mulches do is they help, kind of prevent light and weed growth from coming in. And also, the mulches help increase soil temperature. Now, one of the disadvantages of a plastic mulch is that they do block moisture. So you have to run some sort of drip irrigation system. If you have a woven ground cover, they are permeable to water and air. And what I mean by a permeable or a woven ground cover, that's like the black landscaping cloth. So this can be reused. It also helps reduce the rate of evaporation, so you're conserving soil moisture. So crop rotation, of course, just like with any traditional garden, you can rotate your crops every season. Excuse me. You can rotate your crop every season, or you can rotate your crops within a season. One thing to keep in mind, you do group like crops together. So any kind of fruiting crops, your tomatoes, your eggplants, your peppers. One thing that I'll make mention, in a lot of my pictures, you are not going to see the tomato plant in there. I know tomatoes are grown in a lot of gardens. They're grown in, raised bed system. I am personally highly allergic to tomatoes, even the tomato plant. There are a few pictures of tomato plants in here. However, in this wooden 4x8 system, you're not going to see any tomato plants, and that's only because I have a personal allergy. So group like plants together. If you can see at the second from the top kind of box, I've got my eggplants grouped there. So my inner, let me use the laser pointer. So right here, I have eggplant, and then here on the outside, which you can barely see, that's where I have okra planted. And one reason that I have this is my eggplant doesn't require as much sunlight as okra. So whenever the okra grows up, it tends to provide some shade for those eggplants. Also, I'm grouping like plants down here in this far bed. Those are my squash and zucchini plants. Here you will see my small trellis system. So I've got cucumbers that run up the trellis, and on the inside here, I plant carrots and beets so that the cucumbers shade the carrots and the beets. And then this area right here, I have some new strawberry transplants right here. That's why they're not lush, and you see a lot of green there. And then along the outer edges right here, I have lettuce, spinach, and muslin. But so I wanted to show that picture of how you grow like plants together. So the next topic is support and training. Of course, your support, it helps with the light. It helps light get down also to the undersides and bottoms of the plant. It helps increase air movement, airflow, so to help decrease, disease and insects, and then also space efficiency. There's a new, well, it's not really new anymore, but vertical gardening. Some raised beds, especially if you're in, an apartment, a townhouse, your only option can be these small raised beds or vertical gardening. So here I've got some vertical supports shown, and here is that metal trellis system after the cucumbers have grown. Now, this variety of cucumber, this was the first year that I tested these two varieties. They were an Osnick variety and a lunchbox variety. But this was the Osnick, and they grew and grew and grew. I actually wrapped them above, or they went up and then they went below. And so these are just sticks of bamboo. So I've got a neighbor down the road that I get all the bamboo that I could possibly need. Also, I have used these bamboo sticks on grapevines, to create a trellis system that way. Now, the next picture right here, you're probably thinking, what is she going to show us there? So I literally have a raised bed in my yard. This is an old antique metal bed that I think I maybe spent $40 on it. And so what I do here, this is just an old straw bale that my local farm supply store couldn't sell. You can actually see that there's two of them. There's another one right here. So they couldn't sell those, and they just gave them to me. And what I used for here, these were those small decorative gourds. So I actually used just an old bed as a trellis system right here. And then in these containers, those are just plastic and cloth containers that I grow pollinator plants for bees and butterflies. And then below, I've got a picture of the straw bale garden. I usually do a straw bale garden every year, either at our local courthouse, which is pictured here, or at our local senior citizens building. But with this, I just used, plastic, the sticks to help brace these tomato plants. So that's another kind of vertical support. So you can use trellises, stakes, cages, and twine. You can also see here, I've just got a garden cloth or cloth twine tied right here on the cucumbers. All right. So one other thing that I personally do in the raised bed system, so I kind of like to test and play and figure out, certain varieties. So one of these boxes, especially my squash zucchini box, it can contain up to 6 different varieties. I always plant about, I don't know, 6 different varieties of lettuce, kale, spinach. I always plant, 2 varieties of cucumbers. Right now, I've got 4 varieties of beets, 2 varieties of carrots, 2 varieties of eggplant, and I will do 2 varieties of okra. So to help me in my records, kind of to know what variety grew the best in that box, this is how I ID my plants. Now, the plastic markers, I bought them at a local dollar store. I want to say that I don't know, I got 10 or 20 of them for like $1 or $2. They're very easy, and you can also reuse them. If you make a mistake on there, you can use a acetone or use isopropyl alcohol just to kind of rub off what you've used. I do use a permanent marker on there. And what I do, the picture on the left, you can see where that's kind of like my first box right here is what's going to be planted there. So what this label tells me here on the top left is that it's a Ferry Morris variety. The seed packet was packaged for 2020. It's a lettuce. It's a salad bowl lettuce. It's got 50 days to harvest, and I planted on April the 3rd. So some differences down here. This is, if I just look here, I know that it's a burpee, and the seed packet was packaged in 2016. So one of the reasons that I identified this is that, so if I planted this a la carte spinach last year, and if I had the date of 16 on the seed package, and if it, if it had a good season, if it grew well, if it had really good germination, then I know that I can kind of still save a few of those seeds for next year. But like now, if this baby leaf spinach doesn't grow good this year, I know just to throw away the seeds. So I just wanted to show that. Now, this may be a tell-all of my type A personality that it rolls over into my gardening. But this is just the way that I kind of keep records in my garden. One other kind of final note of some things that I do in the garden. I have a tool cleaning bucket. It's pretty cheap, pretty easy to make. So you can go to your any, local farm supply store, lawn and garden store. You pick up a bucket. This one shown was a 1.5 quart bucket, not that big. Any kind of sand will do. Actually, the coarser the grit, the better. And then you just use some multi-purpose lubricating oil. Of course, you do want to, if you have not cleaned your tools in the past few years and there's some rust development, one solution that you can do, you can put the tips of that tool down in vinegar, and you can leave it anywhere from 30 minutes to overnight, depending on how rusted your tools are, and then scrub it, with a steel brush to get the rust off. Now, this bucket is to help keep your tools clean after they are rust free. So basically, for this 1.5 quart bucket, I used about 4 ounces of the lubricating oil, and then you just stir it around with a shovel. And then the picture on the right, you can notice that I'm a user of one hand tool in specifically, or one brand of hand tool specifically. I'm not going to name the name, but if you can see the colors, I just find they're easy to work with and they last. So final kind of things to go over. UT has a UT Hort website right here, and it's really just uthort.com. You can go to it, or Right here is the site, educational resources. And then also we have the home, we have the calendar. So here are the educational resources right here. You can, on the uthort.com, it's everything from flowers. I know I focused a lot on vegetables today, but there's flowers, there's insect disease, you've got your shrubs and trees. And then down here is vegetable gardens. So you can click on here. Also, Dr. Natalie Baumgartner, she is based out of Knoxville. She does these really great home garden variety trial reports every year. So what she does is these are tested varieties in home gardens, not big, huge, commercial gardens. They're actually tested home growers just like yourself. And here's the results from those. So it kind of shows what varieties were tested in there. My internet's been slow. Give me just a second. Okay, so here it shows all of the locations that everything was planted. So here it goes through a summary of results. I'm not going to go through these, but you are more than welcome to go to this website later and just see what varieties were tested. So here is there's an heirloom pole bean that was done in a raised bed system. So you can see the germination was, okay, the health was good, the first fruit was good. But you can go through here and kind of read about every variety that was tested here within the state. The other link, the other link on here was the home vegetable calendar. And this is great. I use this. I give this out to a lot of clients, but it is available from that uthort.com website. It's printable. I keep one on my refrigerator. This is the calendar that I do keep on my refrigerator. So this tells, your frost dates in the spring and in the fall. Something that's very helpful also, if you do pull this up electronically, here's a whole list of publications that you can refer to. Whenever I have a client coming in the office and they say, I really want to, raise my first garden this year, these are some of the publications that they're given. But I want to scroll through here. I know I'm doing this fast, but I wanted to get to April. So every month it shows a task of something you should be doing for that month. So here is, finish any kind of site prep, finish direct seeding and transplanting. It gives tips on here. Every month has a tip. And then here on the monthly view, it kind of reminds you, let's look at today, the 23rd. So April and into early May is the time to plant turnips in East Tennessee. So if anybody views this, from that area, it's, hey, a reminder. Another thing I like at the very end of this publication, right here. So you can save this as a PDF and, type it in, or you can print it out. But here's your calendar. Here's kind of your record keeping for the year. I always print these out. I've got a copy for every year. of my garden, in that way that I can go back and refer for next year. Also, here is your climate and management overview. Maybe we get a large flooding rain, or you go in and put how much fertilizer you have to put down. If you have to side dress anything, here's your notes that you can keep all in one. And then here's a pest and disease management chart. So if you start getting squash bugs, you can put a report down so that next year you'll know if you're going to get squash bugs at what time of year they may come back again. So this publication is very, very handy. I use it quite a bit. Also, your local extension office, the UT Extension website, and then you can also find your local county office. And we've got an office in all 95 counties, so reach out to them. Your local extension agent, I'm sure, will be happy to help you. Also, I put my information over here on the right. If you would like, this presentation is going to be recorded so you can view it again, but also I have the presentation available on PDF. My email is at the bottom there in green. So if any of you would also like to have, a PDF version of this presentation, please feel free to reach out to me. I'd be glad to send that to you. And with that, I am finished. Are there any questions?
Amanda, we have 3 questions in the chat box. Okay, the first question, Amanda, goes back to soil testing, your raised beds. What specific soil test do you need to use for your raised beds?
Within that publication, let me try to get back to it here. Well, give me just a second. So right here on your soil submission sheet, you have what varieties you're going to be growing, but here, for my raised bed personally, what I get is I get a nutrient test, and that nutrient test is going to come back and show me all of those nutrients right there. But also, I get an organic matter done. So on the soil submission report specifically, there is no box that you check for a raised bed, but go ahead and do the nutrient test and the organic matter.
Okay, the second question is, have you ever used a cover crop in your raised beds when you're not growing your produce?
I have. I have used, clovers, any kind of legume, what those do, because I am only adding the amendments of compost every spring. I will use a legume crop as my cover crop, and then I just use that metal forked rake to incorporate those legumes, those clovers, into my soil. And legumes and clovers are really good plants, are really good cover crops to help increase your nitrogen source, a natural nitrogen source, back into the soil.
All right, the next question is what is a source for the square foot gardening to know how much space to allow for different plants?
on the, well, hang on uthort.com, there is, give me just a second. On uthort.com, on the list of educational resources, for vegetable gardens, there is a publication specifically for raised beds. And on there, give me just a second. There's a specific publication. And let me see if I can get it from here. Here we go. Nope. There we go. All right. So there is a publication specifically for building and using raised bed gardens. Within this publication, there's a chart here that talks about spacing used in traditional raised bed gardens. Also, a lot of these publications will refer you. So what you saw in a lot of my pictures, you'll see that I use square foot gardening. And I hope y'all can see this, but Mel Bartholomew has a book called Square Foot Gardening. Mel Bartholomew, Square Foot Gardening. Those books right there for reference, they tell every vegetable or fruit under the sun as far as plant spacing.
And we've had a few more questions, so I'll pass those along. A question is, where is the recording of this presentation going to be recorded to? Is that going to be to your office YouTube page?
So it will be, the link will be on to utia Extension Perry County's Facebook page. Also, the ag agents within our lower Middle Tennessee area will have access to the recording. And then also UT Extension Perry County has a YouTube channel, and I'm sure other county offices do have their own YouTube channel. So check there as well.
Joetta has made a comment.
Okay. Oh, so on, we also have some great partners within the university. We have AgriBility agents and specialists. They work with, people who may have a health disability. Maybe they need some type of apparatus that needs to be changed or created to help them to farm. So the AgriBility website is agribility.org, and there is a toolbox available that can help assist others as well. I'm going to try to pull that up real quick. Also, I saw another question in the chart or in the chat in there that said how many marigolds. So what is recommended? There are different opinions on marigolds. Some people say that, they're great to keep certain pests away, but also I have seen some reports to say that don't use a lot of marigolds because they actually attract pests. So I use them And so I've got 4 by 8 raised beds. And I usually stick one marigold plant in the 4 corners of each of the 4 by 8 boxes, except for my squash and zucchini, just because the squash and zucchini plants usually take over the whole box and I don't have room. So I hope that answers the question. So here is the Agribility website, and this toolbox has many resources that someone can use as well. So if you know of anyone, that may have some type of disability, maybe they've got arthritis, maybe they've just got a bad back. Like myself, I work a lot with the senior citizens. There's also a veteran program. There's also youth programs. So please feel free to use this as well. Maybe, you need help. Here's the one about arthritis and gardening. So you can pull up here. It's also got a Spanish translation. It's pulling up. And this is printable. So this is a good resource as well, especially if you know someone that needs an assistive technology device. I think that's all of the comments that I see in the chat box over here. I would just like to thank everyone for joining in. Also, as well, if you want to send me an email, I'd be glad to reply with a PDF copy. And feel free, you can reach out to me, or feel free to reach out to your local county extension agent. Here in Tennessee, we've got extension agents in all 95 counties. So thank you for joining, and I hope you have a great day.